I wanna be a producer with a hit show on Broadway. I wanna be a producer.
Hey everybody, Ken Davenport back with you on the Producer's Perspective podcast. We're heading out on the road again today to the Midwest. And we're talking to one of the most influential independent producers of national tours in the country. He's also just a great guy. In fact, he was called an Iowa treasure by the Des Moines Register. Welcome to the podcast, the president and CEO of Des Moines Performing Arts Center in Des Moines, Iowa, Mr. Jeff Chelesvig. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Ken.
So, Jeff, Des Moines, Iowa. It's not the city that immediately comes to mind as being one of the theatrical capitals of the country, yet you've got this thriving theatrical community. They're very supportive of our community. I've played there a number of times, and I was a company manager, and also I've had a couple of my shows there as a producer. So just tell me a little bit about Des Moines and the arts community and what you have to offer there.
Well, Ken, first of all, Des Moines right now is in the center of the universe because of the Iowa caucuses coming up. From a theatrical standpoint, Des Moines has always been a theatrical town and has never had a professional theater company. We don't have a LORT theater there. The closest ones would be in Kansas City and Minneapolis. So touring theater has been an important part of Des Moines for years. There used to be, believe it or not, a 4,000-seat theater called the KRNT Radio Theater that everything that came through stopped at the KRNT Theater. They did the Metropolitan Opera. They did all of the national tours. And to me, it's been a part of the fabric of the community for decades. And our facility, the Des Moines Civic Center, was built in 1979. And we have, it's a very large house, as you know, 2,700 seats. And yet it is all on one level. There's no balconies, no boxes, so it's all one level. Every seat is an orchestra seat. And, we actually draw not only from Des Moines, but also from a rather wide area of Iowa. We have, I think it's most of our people come kind of the corridor north and south, maybe 50 miles either way. Because there are a fair number of smaller sized cities there that don't have access to the kinds of shows that we have. And, the matinees are always very, very, very popular because people north and south can come to the matinee and drive home after that. So, we've been doing I've been there now 21 years, just celebrated my 21st anniversary there. And I still love going to work every day.
So tell me what a typical day for a presenter is. What fills your day?
Well, Ken, in addition to presenting Broadway, of course, we're a performing arts center. So we have 6 different series that we are doing. Broadway is the biggest of those. But we also have to raise a fair amount of money, almost $3 million in our annual fund. So I do a fair amount of fundraising. And gosh, a lot of it is, I think a lot of what I do seems like always working on the next season. We're getting ready to announce our 16-17 season in a couple of months, and we're already working on the 17-18 season. So it never seems to end. I have a staff of about 40 people, and we kind of have to do a lot of different things because in addition to the Broadway series, we also are doing dance, we're doing family shows, we have a small 300-seat theater that we do off-Broadway shows in. And so it's just constantly stuff going on during the season. And I'm always looking for those extra hours at the end of the day.
So you talk about always working on the next season. And it seems to me that presenters now are booking much further in advance than ever before. Is that true?
It's true, and I'm not sure that it's the healthiest thing. It used to be that we would wait until well after the season had started But I find myself now even holding dates for shows that haven't even opened, and it's kind of being done on spec. That kind of drives me crazy. I think it drives a lot of us crazy. We've always had to work on the multi-week engagements. You've always had to work 3 and 4 years out. But for the stuff that's brand new, I'm not sure. I think it's a little too early to tell.
So why do you think this change happened over the last several years, that presenters are being asked to book so much earlier?
Well, I think a lot of times it's becoming a crowded market. I think as every day marches on, and this season we've had some great shows. I mean, I think the last 2 seasons have been remarkable on Broadway. And I can't think of a time when we've had so many positive reviews for a lot of shows. And so I think booking agents, I think producers are kind of saying, hey, let's line up a booking agent now and let's get stuff out there. Again, I fall prey to it, but I kind of wonder because sometimes the good booking agents understand that there is an ebb and flow, and sometimes some of the other booking agents think that once you have a hold down, then it's pretty well firm.
And what are the qualifications you look for when you book? This weekend, when we're recording this, is APAP, the Association of Performing Arts Presenters, or something like that.
Yeah. Yes,
and which is a big shopping mall, basically, for every show, from the big Broadway shows to one-man Einsteins. And presenters go through this market and look for shows to book in their season. How do you pick the right show for Des Moines?
Well, that's a good question, Ken. And first of all, I didn't go to APAP. I do go occasionally, but we have 2 staff members that are there, and they love going to the showcases. A lot of times what they're looking for are the things that are happening in our small space, and also some of the education things and family shows that we do, and a lot of the dance shows that we do, we learn about at APAP. For me, Ken, it started years ago. When I first started booking in Des Moines, I remember booking a show that it was produced by a producer I didn't know. When I saw it, I wasn't happy with it. I thought it was it wasn't well produced. I thought the sets really looked bad. And I kind of made this promise to myself that I wanted to produce shows by people that I know and who I think have the same kind of values that I have. We actually have quite a bit of shows to choose from. We have a number of shows to choose from in any given year. And what I've learned about Des Moines is that they really appreciate quality. They'll pay what it takes to see quality. And I've never been scared of any shows. I've never said, no, our audience isn't ready for it. We have a very, very smart audience. We have people that are well-read, well-traveled. And so they want to see the best. And that's kind of my guiding light. I always say the shows that have profanity and adult situations, those are the easiest. I book those right away. But we tell people that, and we were one of the early markets to do the Book of Mormon. We had no issues at all with that. Going back in the Wayback Machine, we were all scared of Avenue Q because of the language in Avenue Q. That was an easy one for us to book. Again, no problems. So I always, and we'd love to do plays. We don't have a Lort Theater in our neck of the woods. And so we love to do the plays, and our audiences love the plays. So maybe there may be a play coming up soon in Des Moines. Who knows? Has
there ever been a show that you've been really nervous about that opening night for that audience? Ever been anything?
No, never.
I often think of presenters actually like artistic directors of regional theaters, because you really are programming for them, right, in their audience. So tell me a bit about the relationship for presenters to Broadway producers. Obviously, this is something that you look very strongly at. But before you book a show, you look for producers that you've worked with before, that you know. How is that relationship forged? And more importantly, is it a healthy one today? Do you think the relationships are good?
I think the relationships are actually really good. I think that. There's a couple of reasons. I think number one, a lot of presenters like us are now, we're investing in shows. We've been doing it for, since Thoroughly Modern Millie, which was 2002, is that right?
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was the company manager, for those of you who don't know, so I was collecting all these checks
That's
from
right.
presenters going, what's happening here?
And then sending us checks back.
Yes.
Eventually, which was great. But I think when we started investing, Broadway Across America has been investing for a long time, and then a group of us that were not part of Broadway Across America, which is a consortium. Broadway Across America partners with performing arts centers around the country to present Broadway series in I think 35 or 40 markets. And those of us who are not affiliated with Broadway Across America created an organization called the Independent Presenters Network. And specifically, it was done to invest in shows. Sometimes we get the rights to be able to present those shows in the first year of the tour. There are things that come with it. What I see it as being is I like to invest in shows that I think have a chance of having a tour, and again have the producers are people that we care about, or it's a show that we care about. And we're doing a lot more investing in shows. And it did change, I think, the relationship, because before we were just consumers of product, and now we are actually investors in much of that product. And I think it's healthy. I really do. I think the relationship is good. We all need each other. Presenters need producers, and producers need presenters.
You mentioned you like to invest in shows that you think have a really good shot of getting out on tour and being successful. What do you think those qualifications are? What makes a show work on the road?
Well, we'd all love to have many more Wickeds and the Book of Mormons and the Lion Kings. But sometimes, and certainly a show that I know is near and dear to your heart, The Bridges of Madison County, was not a commercial success in New York. We had a very different relationship with that show because the Bridges of Madison County are like 40 miles away from our theater. And so from the very beginning of that process, we were eager to be involved. And we recently just opened the national tour of that show. Again, that was a labor of love, and it just so happened to that out of that came an incredible score by Jason Robert Brown, a great book by Marcia Norman, a beautiful production, Bartlett Shear directing, and all of that. It wasn't a commercial success in New York. It was really a big success in Des Moines when we opened the tour, of course, having the cachet of having the bridges right there. But, I think it is just about as much about investing in shows, even if we don't think they're going to be commercially viable, if they're important to us. And sometimes, again, we are investing to support a specific producer that we really like. So I'd love to tell you that we've always hit a home run with our investments, but sometimes we don't. And, that's the way it is in Broadway, too.
Do you ever book shows that don't play in New York first?
Occasionally we do. I would say that most of the time, if we have a show that is, I would say all of the time when we are doing shows, they have had some kind of either New York or London. We Will Rock You is a good example of a show that played in London, did not play on Broadway, but had a healthy tour, including Des Moines. This year, I think everything that we have started on Broadway, and I think that's true for next year as well.
Do you find that your audiences are knowledgeable about what's playing here on Broadway? So they're coming to the theaters like, oh, yeah, I can't wait to see Book of Mormon because I know everything about it. I've read about it, and now I'm getting it. Or are you educating them on the shows, and they're just going because, frankly, their love of everything that Jeff Chelesvig does?
Well, I first of all, I think that as a presenter, we rely on season ticket holders. for most of the shows, we are guaranteeing the producer a certain amount of money to bring that production to Des Moines. And then we have to pay all of the expenses for that. So in order to really reduce that risk, unless it's a really well-known show that's, played us or played Broadway before, we have to put it on our season, which is a 5-show package, and we rely on those season ticket holders. We have about 11,000 subscribers to our Broadway series. So it is important for us to have titles that, at least 1 or 2 titles that they're going to know. They do put a huge amount of trust in us. We hear from our subscribers year after year that if they see a show that they love but they knew nothing about, that's kind of the great surprise for them. And that's true in a lot of the things that we do, our dance series and our music series as well over the small space. But I think people are becoming a lot more knowledgeable about Broadway. I think there are more avenues for them to learn. I recently wrote a piece for a newspaper in Des Moines, and I said that growing up, the only way that I really had access to Broadway, I grew up in a farm in northern Iowa, was I'd get cast recordings and I would read the liner notes of the album. I mean, that was kind of how I learned about Broadway shows. And I would imagine how the action was going to happen. And lo and behold, when I went to see it, it was nothing like what I thought it would be like. But now you have so many avenues with the websites that are out there. There are some great websites. We are constantly trying to put more emphasis on content on our website for our donors. We try to find entryways into their world. And so recently we just started, there's an independent film house in Des Moines that we're partnering with. And so we are actually running in the cases where there is a film that was the source material for the musical, we're running those films for free. So people can screen Newsies recently. We couldn't get the one that Gentleman's Guide is based on. Unfortunately, it wasn't available, but that's been a big hit. And so I think there are more connection points, but we certainly hear from a lot of our subscribers and our donors that they go to New York all the time and that they are pretty knowledgeable.
One of the things that seems to be very different, of course, or I hear a bit of contention about between presenters and producers, is that producers, we're marketing here to this New York audience, these Upper East Siders, the traditional theater goers. And, I don't know, there just might be a little difference between a Des Moines resident and a New York resident. But here come the New York producers saying, this is how you market the show, this is how you market the show. And I would imagine that at times that marketing needs to be different for that local market, correct?
Well, yes and no. I think, we have our marketing director, Barb Pruce, has been with us for 15 years. And she is really good at what she does. And she understands the media. She understands advertising. And, I think the press agents have become a lot more trusting of people like Barb on the road to understand the market a little bit. Television is important in New York. It's really important on the road, too. Print still plays a part on the road, and it's still important in New York. So I don't know that there's that many differences. I think the other thing, Ken, is if you really look at the research and how many people are coming to see shows in New York, I mean, the audience is largely not New Yorkers here in New York. That's, it's show specific, but if you take all of the averages of who's coming to Broadway, it's a huge percentage are coming from outside of the New York area.
I think your comment about presenters investing in Broadway shows and that improving the relationships between producers and presenters is so right on. It's interesting because producers and presenters are technically on the other side of the table from each other, right? Negotiating, but still in the same trade organization. It's this very interesting relationship. What are some of the other issues that producers may not be seeing your perspective on? That if we were all listening, and we are, every single one of us, what would you want to lobby for for a little more thought from us producers here in New York?
I think that's a great question. First thing I will tell you is I think that the quality of the tours is very, very high. I am very impressed with the casts that tour, the people behind the scenes, the production values. Witnessing the opening of the Bridges of Madison County recently and the hours and hours and hours of tech that went into the lighting and the sound and all of that, it's extraordinary. One of the things that I think is interesting is that we all have such great sound systems and personal listening devices and all of this in our homes and in our offices. And I think that the expectation of the audience is that it's going to sound just like I'm watching a movie at home or I'm at a Metroplex. And the complexity of doing live theater and moving a show in and literally doing a sound check at 5:30 for a 7:30 show in a brand new theater every week with different acoustics, that is becoming, I think, a big issue. And I think it used to be, and I know this is an expense, but I know that it used to be very common that shows would send an advanced person out to kind of scope out the theater and make sure that they laid out the line sets and checked what was going on so that there weren't any surprises when you got to the show. We've had a couple of times this year where, because we don't have a balcony rail, if there are projections from the front of house, we've had a couple of times this year where the carpenter and the electricians, the people that work on these projections say, we're going to have to kill some seats in the middle of your house. Well, then we have to reassign seats for everybody. And I'd like to think that maybe that could have been, worked out beforehand if there had been an advance. But again, there's a cost to it. But I do think that those are the kind of things that I would love to see producers think about going back to, is as the complexity of these shows begins to change. Projection is becoming a big part of Broadway, and it's becoming a big part of the tours then. And that was something we didn't think much about 5 years ago. So maybe having that kind of the advanced stuff would be good. And I also think, though, that in fairness, I really do think the producers have learned that the needs on the road when it comes to content for the web and all of that, I think that's really we've made great strides in that. We've worked it out so that we can have, because again, we are sitting across the table in just from the financial side, but we both want to sell tickets. And that's really important because, as you know, it's just vital for both of us that we can try to fill the houses.
What's the biggest change you've seen in the touring market in the last 21 years of you working in it?
Well, certainly the impact the internet has had. With ticketing, for instance, it's almost all done on the internet now. We have mobile ticketing in Des Moines. I'm smiling because I know that that's a challenge even here in New York, but we do have mobile ticketing, and I think that is probably had the most impact on how we do business. I also think that there has been an enormous amount of work done in ensuring that these tours are as close to the Broadway productions as possible. I think that is a great thing. I think you can probably look back to when Cameron McIntosh said, I'm paraphrasing here, but saying that I'm not going to take a show out that looks different than the New York or London production. And that was really, I think, the start of it. I do think that probably the internet and all that means to us has really changed the theater. But I still love the fact that when the house lights go out, people more or less try to turn their phones off and sit and not think about that phone for the duration of the show.
Well, that comment about Cameron, and I'll never forget that as well. We were desperate to see Phantom of the Opera, and it just wouldn't come to the Wang Center because Cameron was like, until we figure out how to do this the right way, which of course generated even more heat for it here in New York. But interestingly enough, he did that for quality's sake. Now, we also, it seems we need to do it for the audience expectations' sake, because as you say, there's these websites where all these videos and all this material where the audience sees, oh, that's what Wicked looks like. Oh, that's what Book of Mormon or Hamilton looks like.
Right.
So they expect a little bit more when they come to the Civic Center?
I think so. I absolutely believe that to be true. And again, you take a long-running show like Wicked, it's very likely that a lot of people in the audience, when they come to see the national tour in Des Moines, they've probably seen it now 3 or 4 times in Des Moines or other cities. They've seen it in New York. So they have a gauge and they know. So yeah, I think it's the expectation certainly is there, and the expectation of quality is something that we've certainly established in Des Moines.
How healthy is the road right now? And looking over the past 21 years, if it was a patient in a hospital, would you say it's doing very well, about to be released, is critical, intensive care? How do you think it's doing right now?
I think it's a great time for the road. I think subscriptions are, by and large, are up in most markets, or at least they're staying steady. That's our bread and butter in places like Des Moines. Again, to put this in perspective, 2,700 seats in our hall. That means that for the 8 performances in a week, we have just a little over 20,000 tickets to sell. If you take an average theater in New York, 1,200 seats maybe, so you're talking about right around 10,000 tickets to sell in a week. So we have double the number of seats to sell. So subscription is huge for us. I think the subscription model, you hear this from time to time from other segments, like from the orchestra world or from sometimes the Lort Theater, wondering if the subscription model still works. I think it still works for us. Of course, we are typically playing our productions for just 1 week. And we give our subscribers they're buying shows at a discount. They are able to swap between performances. If they have Tuesday night tickets and they can't make it Tuesday night, they can swap into Thursday night or something. So we try to give them a lot of flexibility. But I think nationwide, Ken, I really think that the subscriptions are up. And again, we kind of follow what happens on Broadway. So if it's a down year on Broadway, you can expect that ripple to happen a year later, really. But given all of the wonderful shows that are playing, have played this year, there's going to be a lot of great tours out next year.
And why do you think subscriptions are up? Is it just because Broadway's doing well, so again, you're just riding that wave, or any other reasons?
I think we've worked at it. I think we've made it. What we hear from our subscribers frequently is they like having the same seat for all of the 5 shows that they get to know the people that sit around them. It's 5 times a year that they have on their calendar we kind of say that our subscription base is date night, however you want to define that. Or it could be a girls' night, but it's not just taking the family. We try to program more for adults. There are shows, obviously, that will appeal to a younger audience, but most of the time we're trying to appeal to adults. And I just think that in our busy lives, I think getting those dates, those 5 dates on their calendar makes a big difference to a lot of people. And I think what is also great about where our community is, our theater is right downtown, and there are more restaurants now than ever before. And so you can literally drive in, park your car, go to a restaurant, walk to the theater, make a night of it. And that's really what we hear time and time again from our subscribers and from certainly the restaurateurs know when we have a show in, how important that is for that week.
I love that your subscribers know the people in the seats around them.
Well, we've been doing subscription for 15 years, and they certainly get to know it's quite a sense of community, actually. Yeah, it's important to them.
Are you doing variable pricing on the road yet in Des Moines? Are you premium pricing? Are you raising prices as single tickets start to go for some of the hotter shows?
We are. I mean, we've been doing that for a while. And that's another benefit of becoming a subscriber is that you literally, you buy early, you get a discount, and you're not affected by that. We've had premium pricing for a few years, and it's been very, very successful. Again, for a segment of the population, if they want tickets for a specific night, it doesn't really matter what they pay, and that's okay. We also, on the other flip side, try to have affordable tickets for every performance. We try to do student rush for every performance. So variable goes both ways. It can go up and it can go down. But we've been doing that for quite a while, actually. And, this is we work with a company called TRG Arts. They've helped us a lot in our thinking. And, the scaling of houses and the setting of ticket prices, it's a lot of an art, as you know. I mean, it's an art, and it's something that I think all of us, we used to just set the ticket price and that was it. But when you really look at what, and I know producers in New York are doing the same thing. I talked to a producer once of a long-running show, and I said, how many ticket prices for your show? And he said, about 100. And he wasn't kidding. It was really when it came down to all of the pre-sales and all of the different variables that you can have, it's not uncommon to have a lot of different ticket prices. So, we do it. We're open about it.
What do you think the road will look like in 10 years from now, 20 years from now? The same? You see any big changes coming down the turnpike?
Well, of course, the number one question we get right now is, when is Hamilton coming to Des Moines? I always say, well, have we ever not brought the biggest hit shows to Des Moines? I mean, eventually we get them.
Is there let me just ask you a question, though, about that. Is there pressure under you? Hamilton obviously will be so sought after. It's going to be sit down in Chicago, right?
Right.
Is there pressure for you? And if so, how much to be in that first 6 months, the first 3 months, to try and be one of the first cities?
No, I don't think so. I mean, that happens to us quite a bit. And I don't expect that that's going to happen. And I think in this case, managing that expectation is maybe going to be a little bit of a challenge. But, you go back to 20 years ago, there was a long sit down of the Phantom of the Opera in Chicago. Then Miss Saigon sat down there for a long time. We've seen those kind of Jersey Boys sit down, Wicked, and we're about 6 hours by car from Chicago. And when we bring the shows in, they do huge business. So it doesn't seem to affect us. If anything, it helps to build the brand. Back to your original question, what will the road look like? I still think people really value the touring shows, the quality of them. Every year we do these surveys, and we try to find out what does the average theater goer look like. And I'm going to paraphrase broadly here, but 20 years ago, the average theater goer was 50 years old and female. And today, that average theater goer is 50 years old and female. So I think people do age into becoming season ticket holders for Broadway. Certainly having a big show like Hamilton is going to help, just in the way the Book of Mormon and Wicked and The Lion King and Jersey Boys, all in the Phantom of the Opera, all got people excited and got them into the theater. And then a segment of them said, hey, I like this, and I'm going to become a season ticket holder. And that's what we aspire to. So I'm bullish on the future of the road. I think again, I think we're playing in the sandbox well together. I think the people that are on the road, I mean, you were a company manager. You used to have not knockdown dragouts, but you'd have arguments about deal points and stuff. And now it's like we kind of got it figured out. I mean, by the time you get to Sunday night, everything has been agreed upon.
Thank God, because I'll never forget the day I couldn't start the second act of a show because I got paid. It was one of the most stressful experiences of my life. That presenter is no longer doing it, thankfully.
And that's the natural attrition. But no, I think we haven't really. I mean, I think now we've just gotten to a point where we work well together, and so I'm very bullish on the future.
So my last question, which is my Genie question. I want you to imagine that the Genie from Aladdin shows up in Des Moines, which I assume the Genie from Aladdin will actually show up in Des Moines
hope.
at some point in the near future. And says to you, Jeff, I want to thank you for your 21 years of contributions to the Des Moines performing arts scene and all this great stuff you've done. I want to thank you by granting you one wish only. What's the one thing about the industry that drives you so crazy, that makes you so angry, so mad that you would ask this Genie to wish away with a snap of his fingers or a wave of his wand? Now, Jeff, you're like one of the nicest guys on the planet. If only all of you could see the smile that's been on his face. He's just the most charming guy around. So what makes you so mad that you'd be like, dang it, this is what I'd ask the Genie to wish away?
Well, I'm going to give you not my answer, but I was thinking about saying more leg room because I'm 6'6" tall, so more leg room in theaters would be great. I really wish we could fix the whole counterfeit and secondary ticketing issues. To me, that's the part that kind of gives us a black eye when somebody. There was an article in the paper recently in the New York Times about counterfeit tickets to Hamilton. And I feel like that's still something that is dogging us out there when I get the angry call from somebody who says that tickets for Newsies in Des Moines were $400 and how can we do that? And of course they were looking at a secondary site. So I wish that we could fix that. Maybe I should have wished for something else, but that's kind of what I think is really plaguing us is that secondary sellers. And I understand there are secondary sellers that are really good at what they do, and I think that there is a place for that in some cases. But the counterfeit tickets and things like that, which are easier and easier when you have printed home tickets, where you can just put them in a copy machine or do something stupid like that. That's why I think doing more things like mobile ticketing and what's it called, where you have to have a credit card when you show up at the theater. There's different ways of getting around that, but that's the thing that I wish the most.
No, I think that's a huge problem. I didn't realize you were also facing the problem we were facing it outside of the city as well. You have a secondary ticketing problem in Des Moines?
Oh yeah, I mean. I think it's all over the country. I mean, it usually pops up with the larger shows, but it does happen. And we become a little more aggressive in trying to make sure that if there are sites that pop up, that there is a way to be able to discern between this is not us. We're doing a lot more education on that. And again, the mobile ticket is the easiest. I mean, I fly all the time and I use the mobile boarding pass. I haven't printed a boarding pass in a long time. My brother still does. He flies more than I do, but he collects them because that's his badge of honor, is having those boarding passes stack up. But
we can learn a lot from the airline industry. And I think, first of all, you're 100% right. My mother called me once a couple of years ago complaining about how she just bought Annie tickets at the Wang Center in Boston. And she paid like $175 a ticket because she just didn't know the difference between the ticketing site and the secondary market site. And for those of you out there, if you want some interesting theatrical history on this, David Merrick in The Abominable Showman talks about battling the secondary ticket market.
Right.
And the Broadway League, one of its founding principles was to deal with ticket brokers at the time, decades ago.
Right.
So I think it's a great thing to wish for because we're not getting anywhere.
No, we're not. But I mean, again, there are good ways in which people can resell tickets. Some of the ticketing companies have come up with ways that they can do that, and you can set a seal. The venue can set a ceiling on what those are. So, but it's really boils down to is just making sure that what you buy is really what you think you're buying.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Safe travels back to Des Moines and all those politicians camped out on your front yard. Try to get them to promise more for the arts while you're there.
I will do my best, Ken.
Thanks so much for joining us. And thanks to all of you for listening. We'll see you next time.
I'm gonna be